Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to our normal schedule where I upload on Wednesdays. And yeah. So last week I had a lot of stuff at work that I had to take care of, and that kind of just meant I wasn't able to upload. So that's why I uploaded on, I want to say, Independence Day instead. So, and I'm going to pull up this, and just forgive me if I am going to be using something. Here we go. And please forgive me for putting up Fox Business. It's a good site. But anyway, so yeah. 9.1. 9.1. That's a third of a percent. A third of a percent higher than expected. That's a 1.3% jump month to month. And I always hate it when people are like, well, that's not, you should use core inflation. You know what core inflation does? It gets rid of more volatile measurements, such as food and gas. The problem is that basically lies to anybody trying to get a gauge of how much you're spending to live. Because if you get rid of food and gas, two things that basically every person in this country pays, from your measure of inflation, you're sugarcoating how bad it really is. You're making it look like it's not. You're making it look bad. You're making it look better than it is. And people are like, well, I still pay for these things. Why aren't you including them in your measure of economic health? Like, it's really bad. We haven't seen this high of inflation rate since the 80s, the early 80s specifically, 1981, and a lot of that is just because it was cooling off from the Carter years, right? And if we measured inflation the same way they did back during the Carter administration, during the reign of Smiling Peanut Man, we'd have a worse inflation rate right now. And if we measured their inflation rate the same as we do now, it would show a very similar figure. And it's whether you use core inflation or the headline inflation rate. Regardless of how you do it, we're in a worse situation with prices than people living in the 70s were. I don't think I need to explain just how bad that is. And the problem is, I think a lot of Democrats and a lot of people on that side of the argument, or people who just hate Republicans, are making too big of a deal out of everything that has nothing to do with the economy, that has nothing to do with prices, has nothing to do with inflation. They're hoping that the Dobbs decision is going to be their great savior, and it's not. Think about it. And before I get any further, likes, comments, subscriptions, they always do help. I greatly appreciate them. And they help the channel grow. I'd love to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Now, anyway, the problem is guns, abortion, anything like that, any of these social issues, they really don't matter when the average American has to make a decision. Do I put food on the table or do I go to work? You know, has to make a decision between heat and food, or I guess AC and air conditioning and food. When you have to make that sort of a decision, do you really care in the moment? Do you really care about gun policy or abortion when you've got the question of day-to-day survival at hand? If you answer yes, you've got a lot of problems because you're insulated from that question. You're insulated from the question of, do I fill up my tank halfway, or do I make sure that my kids eat tonight and only put in a quarter of a tank? I don't think that these midterms are going to be anything. The Democrats are not going to have any good news if things keep going the way they are. And the problem is, inflation numbers are not going to go down enough by November to make a difference. And if they do, it's because we've gone into a recession, which is going to be far, far worse. Because while a recession, which, by the way, I genuinely believe that we're going to find out that we are in a recession at the end of the month when they release Q2 GDP numbers, when the Federal Reserve and the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases GDP numbers, I guarantee you we're going to find out we're in a recession. And recessions simply, a recession is by definition just two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. The problem is a recession usually also comes with unemployment increases, comes with the devaluation of any investments, comes with cut wages, cut hours. Again, nothing that's going to reflect well on the current administration. And it doesn't matter how much blame that the administration deserves or should get. They're going to get it. And I would say this regardless of whether a Republican was in office, a Libertarian's in office, a Green's in office, a Democrat's in office, a Commies in office, anything like that. It doesn't matter. Because they're going to get the blame, regardless of how much they deserve for it. So, what to do? Well, I think that the Republicans are probably in a position to do a lot better than I think people expect. They're definitely going to capitalize on it. And I have a sneaking suspicion that polling firms are making the same mistakes they made in 2020. And that could be even worse. And I don't think there's going to be anything that will cause a rally around the flag effect that will help the current administration out. Regardless of whether you want it to or not. And honestly, anything like that would be caused by something that you definitely don't want to happen. So, yeah, right now I've revised my forecast, and maybe it's too bullish for the Republicans, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I can make a reasonable argument for every seat that I have them winning right now that is in the vaguely competitive area. I can make a reasonable explanation for all of it. And most of the time, it's going to come back to one issue, and that's inflation, prices, and the probable likelihood, the very high likelihood, we're about to be in a recession. We remember how bad 2008 was for the GOP. And that was even worse because you had a young, charismatic, top of the line presidential nominee for the Democrats who was driving up turnout in very reliable demographic groups for the Democrats, as well as everything going against the Republican Party, an unpopular sitting president, kind of bland candidate in John McCain, a recession, the housing market collapsing. Basically, everything was going wrong for the Republican Party, and, well, we saw the result. But, obviously, this is, still, what are we now? 4 months out? A little bit less than 4 months out? And time flies. Oh boy, does time fly. Anyway, I want to thank y'all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Have a nice one. Bye-bye.